Hello, everybody. Hello, there it goes. Everybody, hey, this is Patrick Austin from Mojo Up, and this is another Makers Monday, and we are here with James. Of course, James, how you doing there, James? James, he's staring at me. You good, James? I need you to unmute yourself. Maybe he can't hear me. Can you hear me there, Justin? How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Yo,
Not
can
too
you hear
bad.
me?
Yeah, now we can hear you, James. There you go.
Hopefully you can hear me. I
Yes.
can't hear you.
All
I'll
right.
get that fixed in a minute. I might have bumped the cord or something, but I think we are.
Yes.
Hey, I can hear you guys now.
Okay.
Let's go. All right. It's Monday. It's Monday. Are we live?
Yes, we're live.
All right. Perfect. I'm going to shut off the other Facebook thing and we're good. So I don't echo. All right. I got this. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So I am
Totally.
James, I think we lost you.
Yeah, I think we lost him. Yeah, we lost him. I don't think he knows, so I don't think anybody can hear what he's saying. So, Justin, will you go ahead and introduce yourself, and I'll make sure I get James on here real quick.
My name's Justin Eugene Evans, and I've worked with James Wolfgar in a short film called Honor Among Thieves, and I'm a maker. I'm a CEO. I run a small company called EvansWerks Incorporated, and that's about me.
Awesome. Well, glad you're here. Glad you're here with us today. We look forward to talking with you a little bit more about exactly what you do. But with that being said, I tell you what, we're gonna go right into this clip that you have from your new upcoming film, and we'll get right back to everybody.
I think I'm good now.
Okay.
No guns, no knives, and Thurston, no goddamn gadgets.
Now set. No tricks now, you hear?
So,
All right, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I think we're good to go then. Yeah. Thank you for putting together that clip that highlighted all the stuff that we happen to do. But tell us about that entire shot, right, or the entire movie, I guess, that you made.
Dude, I had to. It's almost like a requirement. I'm on your show, and that's how we met, and that's all the amazing things that you did for our little project. So, and right about, gosh, I guess it was 8 months before the pandemic, we put together the short film you just saw, Honor Among Thieves. And we threw that project together. I mean, I think I went from conception to script to storyboards to shooting in about 2 weeks. And its original purpose was to show Steven Soderbergh that it was possible to light an entire feature film with this light that I invented called the Anthem One. And I've since sold that company and started a new one. So its original purpose was really as like a very fancy camera test. It was to say, look, and the things that you can do with that light are remarkable. You know, it's like we were shooting on the exact same set that the Coen brothers had just shot The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So you could do a one-to-one comparison of, you know, here's what a $40 million movie looks like on this backlot in the middle of New Mexico. And here's what it looks like when we've only got $14,000. We also deliberately wanted to show what it's like to limit yourself to what a typical film student has. So we could have had a whole union crew. We could have had, you know, all sorts of stuff. And instead we said, no, we're going to have a 14-person crew. Every single thing that's on this set, costumes, weapons, everything, heaters, because it was really freaking cold. I mean, it's the middle of February in Santa Fe. Yeah. The average night was about 30 degrees. It was actually just below freezing. And so we limited everything to what you can fit into 2 minivans, and that's it. And we pulled up to the location, unpacked our minivans, got rocking and rolling, and then the worst of the worst things that happened to us, but it was awesome under these circumstances. We wanted to be able to shoot for 4 nights straight, moment that at sunset, which was roughly around 5:30 p.m. to sunrise, which was about 6 a.m. And so, you know, that's actually like a slightly shorter but typical film day. We would have about 11 hours, maybe 11 and a half hours of shooting every night. And then the caretaker of the property refused to let us shoot past midnight. And normally a producer would be freaking out. Normally a producer would be like, you know, screaming and yelling and saying, you know, you can't, we signed a contract, we paid for this place. We're paying $1,000 a night to access this backlot. You can't do this to us. We didn't do any of that. We actually decided to lean into it and say, okay, can we still make a movie where our schedule has now been cut in half and we're getting to shoot for 5.5 hours a night. That's it. And then God threw terrible weather at us because we thought we'd been past the freezing snap, and there was frost on the ground. It looked like it was going to snow. Every single night was below freezing. So that means the whole crew was moving slower. So we're like, there's nothing that's actually designed about this scenario to help us. It's cold. We're out in the middle of nowhere. The person who's in charge of our location hates our living guts. And we have a very tiny crew, and we only have 2 minivans, and we still have to pull off a short film that can show an A-list Hollywood director that this technology that I had invented really could do what I said it could do. And not only did we manage to do all that, but the movie has now been in 106 film festivals. It's been nominated for about 80 or 90 awards. It's won about 65. It's won Best Short Film 35 times. We just won Best Short Film again like 3 days ago. I'm actually at a point where I'm losing track of the number of awards. And by the way, you've been nominated a couple times yourself, sir, for your amazing props. And
I appreciate that.
And your stuff was incredible, man. I mean, it's, and we should talk about that because you blew my mind. Like, you know, I found you on Etsy, and but what you managed to do with a couple of the because you did steampunk right, and it just drives me crazy as a nerd and a maker when people go, "Oh, steampunk! I just glue some sprockets and gears onto the side of something, right? That's steampunk." And it's like, no, steampunk done right has to look like everything would actually function and work, and there's a logic and a reason to it, and that's what you did with what we called the hero weapon, the main weapon that Jason Moore was holding up, and God, you did a great job.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it is just actually making things pop up, right, and making things move, even if it's like, you know, hand loaded.
Oh, sure,
stuff like that. And I remember when I met you. On there, we did some video chats, kind of like this. I think I just recorded videos and I was going through a bunch of different things, like, what do you like? And one of my favorite things about working with you, and I've told many people you're one of my favorite directors to work with,
thank you very much,
because you were so excited and you did care, even though it was just a small project, right? And it was really, like you said, it started off kind of as an advertisement thing. And you told me that right away. It wasn't like it was some major motion picture. But the cool part about it is everybody that I was involved with from your team was very, very excited about it. And it seems like that's the whole thing. And then can you tell us about the actors in there? Because I saw a couple pretty well-known actors, I thought.
Well, I'm lucky that one of my best friends is Jason Moore. He's the it started out as his project. He was really supposed to be the star of it. But I think it's fair to say that Michael Tabb, that's the heavyset gentleman with the red beard who plays the antagonist. I wouldn't go so far as to say bad guy, but the antagonist in the short, Sam Spurlock. And Jason Moore plays John Thurston, our hero. And Jason had invested in my technology. He was on the board of directors of my company. We really hit it off years ago, and we had done a super low budget independent feature film together. It was before he had started to become famous, before he started getting prominent work in Hollywood. And we have a mutual love of building things. Jason could tear apart an entire car and put it back together like nobody's business. And so what's interesting is many of the Anthem ones that we shipped were actually built by him. There was a couple times that we got overwhelmed with orders, and I would call him on the phone and go, Jason, I can't handle this workload. And he's like, no problem. I'm going to fly out. I'll help you build the system. So Jason and I are tight. And when I said I was going to do this camera test, I turned to him and I said, if this is in between projects, would you please star in it? He said, absolutely. So I wrote it with him in mind. And for people who don't know what Jason Moore has been in and what he's about to be seen in, he was one of the stars of Marvel's The Punisher on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And he's coming out in a new series for Netflix called First Kill, where he plays the patriarch of a family of vampire hunters. And so that's got me pretty excited. I'm going to be a fanboy and just enjoy watching him in another show.
Right.
And Michael Tabb is a screenwriter in Hollywood. Probably the biggest project that he's ever worked on is he was one of the original writers of Troy that starred Brad Pitt. But I've always felt, because I've known Michael Tabb since we were 19 and we went to film school together at NYU, I've always felt that Michael's real calling was as an actor, because I think he's awesome. He's got this Falstaff quality. He's a huge voice, just this voice that fills the screen and a presence that fills the screen. And so I very much wrote the role of Sam Spurlock with him in mind. And so that's the cast. And all I had to do is put two. What's amazing is this is all it takes to make a good movie. Most people think like a good movie is hard. And I think it's as simple as write a script where the characters are in conflict from the very first line, cast well, and get the hell out of the way. And that's basically what I did.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I mean that sounds fun, right? It sounds like a good way of making it. And I mean, you obviously know what you're doing with winning awards and everything like that. And you're not just a director, okay? And we're 15 minutes in. I don't want to rush. We can come back to this. I definitely want to cover so many things with you, and I want to be respectful of your time and everybody else's. But yeah, so how did you get into directing as well as inventing and then being an entrepreneur and now a CEO of, I guess, a company you sold and now a new company too? So
right.
How'd you get to where you're at now? What's your origin story?
Oh boy. Well, I saw the original Star Wars, real Star Wars. And anyone says call it A New Hope. No, it's Star Wars.
Just Star Wars. Yeah, that's what it was at the time.
I saw Star Wars when I was 4. So I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. And this is still in the age where a multiplex had 3 screens. So, and there was, from probably about 3 to 3.5, I had been aware of Star Wars. And I'd seen the line wrap around the entire block. I mean, hence the term blockbuster. That's really where this comes from. And I was begging my parents to see Star Wars. And they, of course, did not want to stand in line with a 3-year-old for the better part of 2 to 3 hours. So we waited and waited until the line got shorter. And by the time I was about 4, the line was short enough that my parents were willing to endure this silly children's film with me. And all of our minds were blown. All of us were completely wrong about what we were about to see. I still remember as a 4-year-old seeing the first image of that Star Destroyer racing across the screen. And I actually turned to my dad and I said, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I was 4 at the time. And I think this is fairly typical of autistic people. One way that someone who understands autistic people will put it is, have they found their one big thing? And for me, I found sort of like 2 big things in one, because, you know, I started, George Lucas was one of my heroes. I followed him ardently. I was part of the Star Wars fan club, you know, a giant collection of Star Wars figures, always pretending in my room alone, these intricate stories, interweaving it with all of my Legos and my Star Wars figures all over my room. And to me, it always made sense that one could be a visual storyteller and an inventor at the same time. I didn't see a distinction. And George Lucas clearly didn't see a distinction. So to me, this was the role model. And when I was 13, I started making movies. And I got very, very lucky. There was a cable access station not far from where we'd moved to in rural Oregon. We were about 30 minutes outside of Portland, Oregon, in a little tiny town called Clackamas, which honestly sounds like you just got an STD. That's so I said I'm from Clackamas, Oregon. Oh, does that itch? Do you need?
Yeah, like, ow.
So we lived in a fairly rural part out on the outskirts of Clackamas, Oregon. And my dad knew that I was not giving this up, that I was obsessed. And so one Saturday, he got me in his Chevy S10 pickup truck and drove me down to the cable access station in an even more rural part, and said, I've signed you up for some classes. And if you do well in these classes, they'll let you start checking out Super VHS cameras, and you'll be able to start checking out lighting equipment and making your own short films. And it changed my whole life. That's all they did.
So he just surprised you, like, hey, I'm getting you in classes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome.
And these classes were either free or very close to free, like $25.
Right.
You know, so it's super affordable. And this goes to what a great father I had. I was really, really lucky. When he knew that one of his kids was obsessed with something, he was there. And so I started going every Saturday, taking every single class they had. It took about 2 months for me to go through their entire roster of classes. And from that point on, I would go with friends, convince as many high school friends as I possibly could to check out every single bit of equipment they had. And we would go out into the middle of the forest and shoot a movie. And every weekend, the goal was to bang out a short film. And they were terrible movies. They were absolutely awful.
But you start somewhere, right? That's how you learn.
Absolutely. So by the time I graduated from high school, I'd made probably 45 short films, a couple documentaries, 15 commercials, 7 or 8 music videos. And it's just this quantity over quality, unfortunately, but a huge body of work. And then the middle of my senior year, and I should point out, in every single one of these movies, I was a maker. And to me, those things were, you know, since going all the way back to 4, those things were interchangeable. So we'd say, well, we're making a sci-fi movie and we need some set pieces. Okay, I'll grab my dad's power tools and I'll start putting stuff together. Oh, we need some weaponry. Okay, I'll figure that out. We've got vampires. We need to figure out vampire costumes and teeth and blood, and I'd mix the blood myself and all that stuff. So there was always this maker element to the motion pictures. Probably the craziest and wackiest thing was this really weird music video I did. And one of the actors in it said, hey, I really want to smoke a joint in this, but I want it to be supersized. I'm like, not a problem. And so we made like an 8.5 foot long joint that he could actually smoke, and I'd set it all up so we could actually light it on fire, but it wouldn't catch all the way on fire, and brought that into our high school, and he's doing that in the bathroom at Clackamas High School. But nobody thought anything of it because nobody thought like an 8.5-foot joint is even possible. So the teachers are walking by as we're carrying this giant thing on our shoulders, like, oh, we're just shooting a video. And that was basically how it was for me. And then my senior year, I put together this epic vampire movie with about 45 kids from my high school. Giant production, and
Yeah.
like vampire battle underneath the bridges in downtown Portland. And we probably shot that for 7 or 8 days, which was a big deal as a student. And I'm convincing everybody, no, trying to get off book and memorize their lines and stunt choreography and the whole works. And that's the project that got me a full ride scholarship into NYU. And
Very cool.
And from there it was the same thing. From there was this, I was this very strange, socially awkward filmmaker who was always doing technically complicated movies. The biggest one, we almost got into Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Film Festival, but it was deemed it wasn't sick enough. And I had decided my sophomore year at NYU to make this short that was a live action Looney Tunes cartoon. So I had taken the actors and turned them into animated characters that I could manipulate one frame at a time. The type of animation has now sort of fallen by the wayside. It was known as pixelation. And the idea was you'd shoot one frame, then go in, move an actor as if they were a stop motion puppet. And I did this with Michael Tabb, who was one of the stars of Honor Among Thieves, and another actor. And I built these giant wood rigs in my dorm room, and I was wacky. The people would be like, "What the fuck is he doing in there?"
So you've been wacky your entire life, is really what this
Absolutely, 100%.
Because I mean, that's why I said like you're one of my favorite people I've worked with. A lot of it is the wackiness. Like it came out, first conversation we had was all this stuff. Sorry, go ahead. And
that's okay.
Go on, but I'm seeing a theme here, right?
There's definitely a theme. I built this giant wood contraption that would allow me to, because there was this one moment, the story is very simple. It was two people that meet on a street in New York, and neither one will give each other passage. And so they end up getting into an ever escalating fight to the point that, absolute impossible things are happening. They're throwing each other city blocks away. And I needed this one visual effect where one of the actors grabs the other actor by the face and spins him 360 degrees over and over and over again while standing up. And there was no way for me to rig, like I couldn't say hover in space. So we built this giant wooden rig that I could lay the person onto and strap him to for the frames that where his body rotated beyond what the camera could see. And my poor roommate put up with that. And I'm like, I'm taking over the dorm room here and nailing and drilling and hammering and stuff. He's like, okay. And so that's I was always this weird hybrid of the two.
Yeah, and it seems like it. I mean, obviously it worked out, but that's probably what kind of went into how you became a leader of a company, right? And I mean, because your leadership skills and your visions that you've had seems like it's been there since the start. So you want to tell us more about, I guess,
Sure.
going into EvansWerks and what you've got going on now?
Well, I think the desire to lead a team goes all the way back to high school, and half of it is stuff that I did in high school, and the other half is a necessity as an autistic adult who could not be employed. And boy, did I try, and would just. And most people may not realize that I'm autistic, but I am. And in fact, one of the most deeply insulting things somebody can say to an autistic person is, gosh, you don't seem autistic. No, I really am. And but I'm 48 now, so I know how to mask well, and I know how to mimic the social behaviors of non-autistic people. But I sure as hell didn't know how to do that at 18. And so part of this came out of a necessity to be able to make a living, because I was basically unemployable And anytime I would get my foot in the door, someone immediately would go, "That guy's weird." And it's the first 10 minutes that usually ruins it for autistic people. So there's that part. But the other half is that I was part of speech and debate team in high school. Absolutely loved it. Just that was my whole world. And was voted in as vice president of our speech team my senior year in high school, and got the opportunity finally to shape a team the way I thought it should be run. And I think that this started to shape my management philosophy, because what surprised me about speech team when I joined it as a freshman and had these starry eyes and thought this is going to be a haven for nerds, because none of us are cool. And we had an excellent speech team. Our speech coach was amazing. She sent an average of 1 to 2 students every single year to nationals. Even though we were a public high school, we would constantly compete against the very best throughout the Northwest and win. So it was, and she very much shaped it as a place that was a haven for nerds. And my older cousin was already on speech team, so she asked me to join. And I'm like, this is going to be an amazing experience. And from day one, I was hazed. And so were all the other freshmen. And I was like gobsmacked that people who were the butt of the joke in high school would, when given just the barest bit of power, do exactly to other people what was being done to them. I couldn't understand it. And so I endured the hazing my freshman year and saw the other freshmen being hazed. And sophomore year, now you're under the radar, but you're not special. Junior year, you're part of, the more advanced speakers, but you're not allowed to haze yet. It's not your turn. And senior year, now we get to bully the living hell out of every single kid on the team that's coming in as freshmen and sophomores. And I don't even know how I got the idea, but we were at this cookout, all of the seniors, about 15 of us, planning what we were going to do for our senior year now that we ran the speech team. And I was vice president, and I turned to the other students and I said, how about we don't haze anybody? And I still remember there's at least 2 kids who became physically agitated, angry, and saying things like, it's our turn, this is our birthright, we put up with it, now the freshmen have to put up with it. I said, I got this weird idea, and what if hazing is holding us back? What if we could do even more if we didn't haze? And I don't know where this came from. And I said, what I want to do instead is to create a brother-sister program. Every single senior and junior has to adopt a freshman and or sophomore. And from day one, it's our job to actually teach them and train them and go to their rounds and give them advice, practice with them on the bus on the way to the speech tournament. And were either of you ever involved in like speech teams? You know what I'm talking about at all?
No, I was on the math team.
Okay,
not
math
team.
math
The same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like, did you have Saturday events, Saturday tournaments, that sort of a thing?
I mean, yeah, we had like states and stuff like that when we went to those. Yeah.
Okay.
We did okay, but we didn't have to go. You lost the first day typically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a typical speech team tournament, which will sound boring to most people, but it was heaven. You get in the bus at like 6 a.m., drive 2 hours to the other part of the state, usually a college campus. 65 to 120 schools are now sending about 15 to 20 students each. So there's easily 800 students who are now there for the speech tournament. Everybody's competing in individual events, everything from stand-up comedy to Lincoln Douglas debate to improvisation, dramatic interp, humorous interp, the list goes on. And if you win, your points are added up and it goes towards an accumulative score to decide who the best team is. And generally speaking, seniors and juniors, of course, win, and freshmen and sophomores lose. That's just quite logical. And there's a junior division, but and thus freshmen and sophomores. But there's still, because they're getting so little help and they're being bullied so much,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they're almost like in a haze. They're barely holding it together, and you get a high dropout rate. I'd say 50% of the freshmen in our team would leave. But we decided instead to do this brother-sister program, and I still don't know how I talked the other students into it, because they were hell-bent that it was our birthright to bully. And we decided we'd give it a shot. So about 2 weeks later, school starts. There's a speech class where a speech coach starts signing up freshmen and sophomores to join the team. About 2 weeks after that, we go to our first tournament. We've paired everybody up. We've started rehearsing. And we find that the freshmen are doing better than they've ever done before. But the greatest thing that happened is we suddenly found that all the juniors and seniors were doing better than they ever had before. Because instead of focusing on being little assholes, they're focusing on their craft and choosing to get better, and they're listening to their own advice. You can't, you learn more as you're giving somebody advice. You're like, you can't help it. It's filtering into your own subconscious. And so the first tournament we did exceptionally well. But then it just kept going and growing and growing and growing. And by about halfway through the year, our one team out of 120, our one team would come home with 50% of all the trophies offered at the entire tournament. I ended up winning 27 consecutive first place trophies. We were ranked #1 in the state. And we went to this major tournament known as the Tillamook Invitational. And there was probably about 100 schools there. And we walked away with somewhere between 75 and 80% of all the trophies at the entire thing, shut out about 90% of all the other schools. We would go into a finals round, and it was entirely our high school, second, third, fourth, fifth place. The organizer of the tournament came and brought the big cup that gave it for best team. And he actually said, as he was about to present, he says, "We have never seen a team like this in the history of the Tillamook Invitational. They are the monsters of the Midway, Clackamas High School." And we scared the living hell out of every other team, but not because we were mean, because we just dominated everything. And by the end of that year, we ended up sending 5 people to nationals. We were the largest percentage of Team Oregon. Our team had grown from this small little group of nerds. Football players were joining, basketball stars were joining, cheerleaders were on the team, 65 students on the team. We won so much, it was staggering. And I think that's what really informed that there's a better way to do things. And I brought that into the way I have tried to create companies, because the same metaphor, take everything that I learned in speech team and apply that to American capitalism. Not to get negative. But,
no, you can go there. That's totally fine.
American capitalism has problems, and very much can be a hazing ritual, particularly for founders, first employees, and there is the attitude that, well, it was done to me, so I can do it to you, and it can be a very toxic environment, and it doesn't need to be. And one of the things that I brought into Anthem One, but was never able to pull it off because we just didn't have enough capital. And I was slogging through that first layer of the first time you get a buyout and you finally have millions of dollars in your hand. And so there's all these things I had told the people that had been involved with Anthem One over the years. Things like, we're going to make sure that every single employee is put in the position to become a millionaire. Things like we don't think in terms of the short term, we think in terms of multi-generational legacy. That the purpose of the company, yes, we're a capitalist endeavor, but we only focus on inventions that enhance democracy and make human lives better. There needs to be a profit motive, but we see it backwards. We see it the way that Walt Disney once said, everyone else in Hollywood makes movies to make money. I make money to make movies. And that's how we approach invention. And so we're very, very picky about who we let into our team. We're very cautious to make sure that people have the right kind of soul to work for our company. And then I go out of my way to create an environment where people are not overworked, they are valued, we're incredibly inclusive. We have an absolute no bullying policy. People are allowed to make mistakes.
Yes. Thank you for all of those things.
So
Keep going. Sorry.
that's the only way that you can have a healthy business. And most businesses, in my opinion, are not healthy. Most businesses are toxic environments. And we were seeing it right now. This is the reason why we've got the great dropout or the great quitting that's happening across the United States. And there is a better way to do this. And then there's enough people that say that sounds like a hippy dippy socialist dream. No. It is unfettered capitalism. We want to make money, but not at the expense of the incredibly intelligent and wonderful people that work in our company. And so we make it clear that the product is the boss. I'm not the boss. My staff has the right to call me out if I'm late to a meeting. Hey, Justin, this meeting was at 4:00. You're the CEO. You should be here at 3:58. That doesn't bother me in the least. So, and I've amazingly, by having this philosophy, I've put together the best team I have ever worked with. And it has been worth every moment of sacrifice to give up my first company and sell it, because for the first time in my life, I'm working with people that I work probably 65 hours a week, and I don't feel like I have a job anymore.
I've talked to quite a few people that love what they do, and that's great. I have so many questions and comments on that whole thing, but yeah, it sounds like a great place to work. First of all, you mentioned that you'd sold your company,
right?
But you're currently talking about your new company.
Yes.
Right. And
yeah,
tell us about what's the name of that new company. And then actually Charles has a really good question too.
Okay. My first company, and it wasn't my very, very first company, but the first serious business that I was running, which I just sold recently, is a company called Anthem One Incorporated. And it's the company that we built around this technology that I created, which is an ultra advanced lighting system. And it's more than that. That's how we had to market it first. What it really is a electromagnetic platform. And there's things that we did that took it to a whole new level. But it doesn't matter how good your tech is. If you've got the wrong investors, the wrong CEO, the wrong executive, your company is already doomed for failure. It's not the technology that makes a business succeed. It's the people, and people will pay lip service to that. If anyone watches Simon Sinek videos, he talks all the time about how important people are, and people within Silicon Valley and Orange County and Arizona have, the sort of major areas where you get financing on the West Coast. They've all learned to mimic that talk. They don't know how to walk the walk. Within Anthem One, I tried probably 5 times to do what we're doing now, to just build a team and get it to the right point. But my investors were my worst enemies. And I eventually gave up. I knew that what I was going to have to do was what everybody else had done in Silicon Valley, what Elon Musk had to do, what Steve Jobs kind of sort of had to do it. And that's what my wife and I refer to as the Queen's Gambit. That means you sacrifice your queen in order to win the game.
Right, yeah.
And as much as I had loved the technology, what was made very clear to me is that no matter what I did, no major investor was ever going to invest unless I gave up control. And so I agreed to sell the company in exchange for being CEO, and then the very next day I was dismissed as CEO. But we saw that writing on the wall, and it's as much as it was frustrating and personally challenging, it was also, most people become wealthy by screwing other people over. And what my wife and I had decided consciously is that I would become wealthy by allowing myself to be screwed over. And that bought my freedom. And
right.
By buying my freedom, I could now finally build the business that I always wanted to build. And that is worth everything. So it's like, I don't have a single bit of regret over moving on from my first company and moving in because now I'm the sole investor. Well, that's actually not true. I'm very lucky that three of my best friends from Anthem One believe in me so much that they are now investing a significant amount of capital. But on day one, I was the sole investor, and that meant that I could finally shape this corporate culture that I had been trying desperately to. I'd even turn to my wife a few times. I'd turn to friends and I said, I don't understand how I got to build a team when I was 18 and I haven't been able to do it since. And I think that the answer was that I wasn't allowing myself to be hazed, and that I had to go through another hazing ritual and come out the other side relatively undamaged and make the choice and say, okay, now that I've been hazed, I'm not going to do that to other people. And now that's exactly what we're getting to do.
Right. So tell us about now. What's your company, EvansWerks, which is what it is now. If you have a website, where can we find out more information on, and what do they do?
Well, we don't have
a
website yet.
Okay.
We're about 6 months old, and there's 11 people in my team, and kind of in stealth mode, so I can only hint at it. So first and foremost, we are a research and development corporation. What we do is we sit down and brainstorm the most difficult technologies fathomable, and then we figure out how to bring them to life. And I'm really lucky that I've got this amazing team of engineers, and I look for very specific things in engineers. Generally speaking, if you go to engineering school, the purpose of engineering school is to drive you towards making very safe, conservative decisions, because more than likely when you're employed at a place where somebody wants to just hire you for is fix this widget, make sure it works, make sure it won't be recalled. And that's not really an environment for creativity and risking failure and trying crazy stuff. And so there's a complicated and undisclosed training process or trial that I put engineers through. And if they come out the other side, I'm like, you're somebody I want to hire. And so my first two hires, the two amazing engineers, Shoaib Badat and Cody Hubman. Shoaib Badat is based out of South Africa, and Cody Hubman is based out of Montana.
Oh, so you got people all over, right?
Yeah.
You're completely virtual.
Completely virtual.
Awesome.
That's another critical part of what we decided about the company, is that we're going to lean into what the pandemic has finally given us. And we're like, why would we waste money on office space and a big logo on the side of a building? And that's stupid. I want to put money into salaries. I want to put money into our fabrication laboratory. I want to put money into our machines. I want to put money into our patents. That's where we put our capital. And so we have virtually zero waste in terms of what we're spending every month. There's no rent, no utility bills, none of that stuff. Totally completely necessary. I can only hint at it, but there's this critical piece of technology that we call codename Petra, and it has the potential to revolutionize all electronics on the planet Earth. It's
yeah. I think you mentioned a little bit over some dinner. Over that before, and that was really intriguing. I want to know more, but not now because we can't.
We'll wait till our patents are filed, and
you call me, and I want to get you back on the show or something like that. We need a follow up to this at some point.
Absolutely, and it'll blow your mind what we've figured out. But we're already on our second prototype. Second prototype works.
Perfect.
We're probably going to be done by February with the technology and ready to actually commercialize it. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's actually, that led to a couple other breakthroughs. So we have 3 major engineering projects going on at the exact same time. And each of them is equally mind-blowing. And so for the next year, what we're focused on is what I call our Lego building blocks. So each of these technologies can, of course, be licensed and sold to Fortune 500 companies, but they can also be put together to create phenomenal products that have the potential to dramatically change our world. And I'm being very vague deliberately.
No, you should be. Yeah, we're live right now, so that's a thing.
Right, exactly. I don't know who's watching, and
Sure.
an engineer at Tesla, and I'd rather they have to license our stuff than figure out our stuff. My engineers are juggling these three major projects, and the rest of my team, from Luis Cafisi, who's our chief marketing officer, to James Krubell, who's our chief sales officer, to Ulysses Curry, who's our chief financial officer. Their focus is working on sort of the left brain part of the business, making sure that all the building blocks are in place so that when my engineers and I finish these first pieces of technology, they are ready to hit the ground running and monetize them. And I finally get to be the CEO that I want, also in the sense that I do what I call the boring stuff. And I don't mean to, that sounds denigrating to the people working in the, I don't enjoy sales. I don't enjoy marketing. I don't enjoy business development, but I have to do those in order to have the job that I want. So I've got sort of a 90-10 rule. 90% of my time is spent with my engineers, and I see myself as an engineering CEO. 10% of my time is making sure I've hired the right people to do the other parts of the business and empower them to do those things right, and then get the hell out of the way because I don't enjoy that part of the business anyways.
Right, and you get to, you were saying you got freed when
Yeah.
you got your first one. So now, if you're actually in the end a maker and a director and an engineer,
So that's,
you get to do that now, which is fantastic. I'm super happy for you.
So and engineering is making. I mean, it's funny that I think some people will make a distinction, and it's a completely arbitrary distinction. What I absolutely love about working with the right kind of engineers is the conversation will kind of go like this. Hey, wouldn't it be awesome if solar panels had 90% efficiency instead of 18% efficiency? And then we just brainstorm that. We're like, well, what would it require for that to even be possible? What kind of material sciences would we have to teach ourselves? What other science disciplines would we have to understand? What tools, what weird gadgets do we need to make the prototypes? Okay, let's go do that for 6 months. And I deliberately picked something that we are not working on. So that is how we've approached things. Every day we've got a 10-minute check-in where I'm working with each of my engineers individually, seeing where they are on the project, seeing what sticky spots they've got. Then every Wednesday we have a 2-hour whiteboarding brainstorming session where we are not supposed to talk about our current projects. Usually somebody comes to the table with like a wacky idea or a YouTube video, and that just spurs a total blue sky crazy conversation about what could we do scientifically.
So you're all, how many employees do you have right now? And they're remote everywhere, right?
11.
11. So yeah, I want to get to Charles' question too. It's a really good question. So you have 11 employees around the globe, really, and then for 2 hours every Wednesday, you guys get to just play and have fun.
Yes.
And of course, you build creativity and everything else, like you were saying. That's fantastic. And I love the as somebody, I run my own company as well, and I also do a bunch of other things. But the 10-minute check-in, keeping people keeping you up to date, but not wasting anybody's time. 10 minutes is enough for that if it's daily. So that's super cool. So let's get to his question here.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second.
Oh no, you're totally fine.
My son is checking in with me, and he knows that I'm doing this. He's like, "Hey, we're home. Are you still busy?" And I say, "Yeah, still busy." Okay, now I'm back. Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem. It's family.
Yeah. What was the question?
His question is, how many employees do you have that are on the spectrum somewhere?
Oh, on the spectrum. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
because you are also an advocate too, I should say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
so you can talk about that too.
I don't actively try to hire autistic people,
Mhm.
but it seems inevitable. They seem to keep gravitating towards me. So probably the only person who's out of the closet would be my IT specialist, and his name's Justin Nabke, and we've actually been friends since we were 8 years old. And I had a hard rule that I would never hire a friend, because the problem is if you hire friends and you have to fire somebody, you lose both your employee and your friend. And so I always try to keep a wall between those two things. And Justin Nabke's fucking incredible. And it's just and he kept bugging me because he runs an IT company in Santa Barbara. And so he's actually technically not an employee. He's a contractor for it, but he does all our IT stuff. And he kept saying, give me a shot. I'm like, Justin, what if it doesn't go right? We both have the first name Justin. And so actually I call him Nabs and he calls me Avianzo. Those are our nicknames since we were in elementary school. And we're like, man, what happens if this doesn't go right? And then I got in a jam about a year ago, and he was the one guy I could turn to who I knew could solve the problem. And he blew my mind. Just blew my mind with how fast he was, how good he was, how thorough he was. And I said, you're my IT guy for life. And so he's, I think it's fair to say he's out of the closet, and both of us are open about the fact that we're on the spectrum. There's at least 2 other employees that I suspect are also on the spectrum, but it's not my place to say that unless they have decided that they're on the spectrum. But I'm actually formally diagnosed. I've actually seen a psychologist, and he described me as severely autistic. Like, thanks, buddy. That's a nice way. Severely autistic. All right.
Severely, I'll have to remember to.
Severely neurotypical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that that's four out of 11 people, and yeah. So and very open to hiring autistic people. In fact, one of the things that I love about having a remote organization is I very much want there to be an open door policy for anybody who has a disability. The typical disabled American has an incredibly difficult time getting a job. And I saw this great video of a Japanese factory that had decided to adapt their factory so that it was disability accessible. And so they put all the tables on these hand cranks, cleared the pathway so they were wide enough for a wheelchair. There's all these things that they had done, and they thought they were doing it simply for the disabled community in Japan. And it turned out that it increased productivity for every single one of their able-bodied employees. And so to me, it's the moment you create a place that's inclusive for all human beings, you've actually created a place that's inclusive for all human beings, and everybody seems to thrive, including the people that you would have assumed would have thrived to begin with. And so someone could say, look, I'm a nonverbal autistic person and I want to work for you remotely, and I'll do everything through email and text. And we'd be like, sounds great to me. If you're brilliant, we want you. So
yeah. And it goes back to your rule about not hiring a friend. I mean, the guy was just brilliant enough as well.
Oh yeah.
And he proved himself, and you have to at that point, right?
And being my friend, he has to be doubly brilliant, because that's the only way to get through the door.
Right.
And we get along smashingly well. And just like, if anyone has dealt with a lot of autistic people, there's a fairly common saying, if you've met one autistic person, you've only met one autistic person. And so our personalities are as different could be. Justin Nabke and I are fundamentally different human beings, except for the things that are common traits amongst autistic people, which is we tend to have obsessions. We tend to speak our minds bluntly. We are terrible at censoring ourselves. We can pontificate for an hour about the most esoteric of topics. We're incredibly loyal. We don't suffer fools well. And I'd say those are our common traits. Some of the ones that I have, which fall within typical autistic traits. But not every autistic person is like this. I'm god awful at sports. there's a little cluster of cells in the human brain that deals with proprioception. Proprioception is your awareness of where you are in three-dimensional space. And it's fairly common, it's not universal, but fairly common that a lot of autistic people, that cluster is smaller, and therefore our proprioception is off by about 1/16 of an inch, and hence why we're clumsy. So I can't catch a football, I can't catch a baseball. I'm if it requires eye-hand coordination, I am awful at it. I got the crap kicked out of me in elementary school because of how bad I was at sports like that. Lifelong insomniac. Cannot go to sleep because of the cluster in cells in my brain that produces serotonin doesn't work right. And without that, I can't create the melatonin naturally that would trigger sleepiness. So when I discovered melatonin about 10 years ago, it changed my life. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't have insomnia. Motor mouth, know-it-all. All of these are things that you could accuse me of. And slowly over the course of decades, acquiring things like the ability to make eye contact. I'm faking it. I do it for about the first 30 to 45 seconds, and then I've learned most neurotypicals assume after 45 seconds there's a bond. Now that eye contact has been established long enough, we've got some sort of rapport, and then I can actually be myself. And you'll notice even within our conversation, that's when I start looking off, and just because my brain thinks better when I'm looking off into nowhere. All of those are typical autistic things, and I spot them in other people. But I try to censor myself and not go, I think that you're autistic just like me, because that could get really annoying.
Yeah, it could, but you're describing a whole crap ton of things that I consider myself. So
and there's
maybe I need to get that.
Dear Lord, there's a lot of makers. It's a very, if you think about autism, nerdiness, and makerdom all overlap huge. And so it wouldn't surprise me in the least if you might also be on the spectrum. And
I mean, a lot of the things you just described, especially insomniac thing, and pretty much everything but the sports was pretty dead on. I can catch things.
We've got another guy that we're looking at, and he might be our 12th employee. And he and I've already talked many, many times, and he said that he's on the spectrum, and he was awesome at sports. Blew my mind at first because I had never met someone. It sounds like you were as well. Like captain of the football team and playing basketball, all these things.
I was playing Magic the Gathering and being a nerd in high school, but yeah, I still could play sports. Well, yeah.
We would have gotten along well. Hey Patrick, you haven't chimed in on very much at all.
Yeah, speaking of Magic the Gathering, that's where Patrick comes. Come on, man.
Okay.
Oh, I'm just listening because you guys are giving. Yeah. I mean, James has good questions today, so I'm just listening. I'm just taking it in.
I told you, and I told this to Kofi earlier. I'm like, Justin's a very good speaker. Hence I guess when you were practicing the entire, I didn't know you went to destroy a speech team forever and ever and ever. You said like 26 championships in a row or something, just personally.
Oh, that was senior year, and
just senior year. Oh, sorry.
Overall, probably around 80 or 90 speaking awards. Went to 2 different nationals. One I placed second in. So then by the time I went to college, I thought about doing speech team. I actually gave it up because all I wanted to do was make movies. Right. So
you make our job really easy when you're doing that, right? Like I can ask you a question, and then
coach, right? We got to thank my coach Diane Edgington because she put the effort, because I was not good to start with. My freshman year, I was 0-100. I lost everything, and
you hung in there past the hazing and changed that game too, which is a great story. Have you been back? Have you gone back to that school and been like, hey, remember that time that I was here and like?
About 10 years ago, but unfortunately all the teachers that I had moved on.
Right.
And we did a special screening of my low budget feature film. But I no longer really felt like I had much of a connection because I didn't know any of the faculty there. And And also my whole childhood I was bullied a lot, and so I very much wanted to get the hell out of Oregon.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm sorry I even asked you if you want to go out to your high school because I know I don't.
Oh,
right. That's most people are like,
I haven't gone back to any of my high school reunions. I'm not interested. What I came to realize is just because I shared a zip code with 240 other kids doesn't mean that we really had anything in common.
Right.
And very briefly had, because Facebook was huge, just as I was preparing for my 20th high school reunion, and I reconnected with a bunch of the people and was stunned to find that many of them were still lost in the 80s, as if the best thing that ever happened to them was high school. I'm like, I don't have a lot in common with these people. And I know for a fact they're not going to like me now. I'm even nerdier and weirder and more self-confident, and they're not going to like that. And I think the only self-made millionaire in my high school, so that's not going to win any brownie points.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's some respect probably, right? And also, I mean, everybody has those high school friends that it'd be great to see what they're doing now. But well, I gotta switch up the subject. We're an hour in. I definitely want to be again respectful of your time. But we have a couple questions that we ask all the time that we have to ask you.
Let's do it.
I get yelled at when we don't ask by people who watch it, and that's not true. Nobody yells at me. But Kofi, you wanna take the first one? I'll take a couple.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Justin. So you've done a lot of different things. So I mean, and inside of each one of these things, maybe we'll actually go with your filmmaking, your inventing, and then maybe your making. What are your favorite tools to use?
My favorite tools. Okay. I have a traditional answer. I have a non-traditional answer. So my traditional answer was my Glowforge Pro at my previous company. So I was one of the Kickstarter backers of Glowforge. Are you guys familiar with Glowforge?
Yeah, it's a in-home laser cutter, a desktop laser cutter for people who
It's badass.
don't know. I hear good things. I've not used one.
I love it so much because it took all of the painful bad UI elements out of traditional laser engravers and laser cutters, and made it as easy to use as a Mac, and so I could just get to making, and so that's my favorite traditional tool. This is my non-traditional answer, the internet. And here's what I mean by that. Making starts with research. And what changed my life was the realization that I can get PhD level physics books on Amazon for $60. I can watch the very best videos on quantum mechanics on YouTube. I can research anything. And so, in fact, one of the things I look for in employees is how good of a Googler are they? And if someone says to me like, look, how do I do that thing? And I'm like, why are you asking me? Go ask Dr. Google. I want to see how good
Exactly.
And so I want to see like how good is someone's research abilities. And so for me, that probably sounds like someone's like, well, I mean, power tools and things that you can, and they're like, no, I think it all begins with using the internet correctly.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair answer. And you're right. I mean, knowing how to Google things, I try not to judge people too much. A lot of times it is like a just use of the internet barrier, like the more you use it. But yeah, you need to know how to look into things when you're making. And it's absolutely the first place to start most of the time.
Yeah. Have you, I assume you guys have both been on Instructables?
Oh yeah. Instructables is a great, I mean, there's so many, and there's always more websites that come out.
Yeah.
YouTube videos and makers and people who are willing to share things. We talk about this all the time on this show specifically because unlike a lot of communities, the making community, and also I'm in the cosplay community as well, which very much doubles, but they're very supportive, and they're very much, a lot of times makers are just, hey, I found this really cool thing that I know how to do, that I found out how to do. Let me tell everybody about it instead of let me try to patent it and then do this crazy thing on it. Because a lot of it, one, isn't worth patenting it, right? It's just a how to use glue differently on this one
Oh, sure.
material. So it's not something that you can really do that with. And then two, it's just exciting, right? So people they'll get really excited about it. They know, well, I can use this one technique and I can use this laser cutter in this certain way, and it's going to change things for a lot of people.
Sure.
And a lot of makers are very much into that. And you look at the 3D printing community, and you look at how everything is changing as far as like filaments and materials and time to print and the way things go through. And it's crazy, but instead of it being one of those hush hush things, everybody's talking about it everywhere, and they're happy to tell you, like, hey, I tried this way and it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Right. So in the same way that what you were just saying with about being upfront and blunt about things, I feel like there's a lot of makers who do that.
Yeah.
Right? And they'll tell you, like, this is just not something that worked out well for me. It might work for you, but it doesn't work for me.
Sure.
And that's helpful because you can get past the bull crap of it. Right.
Best maker I've ever worked with. I was taking a blacksmithing class at a maker space in Milwaukee, and this guy had probably studied blacksmithing for a decade, and with old school people, really trying to preserve the 19th century art of blacksmithing, and so he actually had an old fashioned anvil and had built his own crucible and walked us through the whole process of melting metal and putting steel in and watching for when it changes the right color and bringing it out, how to shape it, and I'm not an excellent blacksmith. I'm totally an amateur, but his willingness to share his knowledge just blew my mind. And then that was a $20 class. That was one of the best things I ever did. So yeah. What's next? What's your next one?
Well, we have a question from maybe your former neighbor or your old neighbor, possibly somebody who knows you.
Okay.
From Cody Mayberry.
Yeah, where'd you go?
He's right here. He's like,
Where'd
hey,
you go, man?
I don't know the name Cody Mayberry.
I think he might be alluding to the fact that you're now a nomad. We didn't really talk about that too much. But you're just like all over the place now, right?
Well, yeah. So once I sold Anthem One and had decided to build this virtual company, I realized I don't need an office. And my son, who's also autistic, did not want to go back to school. And so I started looking into online schools for him because he thrives in an online environment. And I completely understand part of the debate in the United States about the pandemic has been that a lot of highly social neurotypicals have not thrived doing homeschooling, and they desperately need that social element, and I respect that. But my son took off like a rocket the moment that he could study at home. So we enrolled him in this phenomenal school, George Washington University Online High School, and I think it was about the second day after we'd enrolled him, and my wife turned to me and she said, "We don't have to live here anymore." And I said, "You know what? You're right. Sell the house, sell everything. Let's go. We're just going to hit the road." And so now we sort of bebop from Airbnb to Airbnb about every 2 to 3 months. I'm currently in Quebec City, and which is one of the most gorgeous cities I've ever been in. You can't fully see the architecture behind me, but there's just these beautiful French rooftops and next up we've already spent some time in Montreal. Next up on the list is Mississauga, because that's my son wants to go to college in Mississauga to study animation and electrical.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so he's a nerd too, and he very much wants to work at Disney Imagineering, and so he's like planning on double majoring in either figure drawing or animation and electrical engineering. And so we're going to go there and look at Sheridan and spend a month there. Then downtown Toronto for a month, then the outskirts of Toronto for 2 months, then likely Taiwan for 3 or 4 months. And for the next year, I'm going to be going from city to city as I start to build what we're calling engineering pods. And these are micro offices, not with the intent that an engineer would ever have to work there, but with the intent that they have a private makerspace / fab lab that allows them to prototype our components faster. And so this is like a 2,000 square foot office in downtown Taipei, Cape Town, South Africa, Ukraine, Kiev, Ukraine, and probably Monterrey, Mexico. And with each of these, really tricking it out, doing the Silicon Valley thing, having a chef there 3 days a week, 3D printers, laser engravers, CNC workstation, lathes, the whole works, and making it super easy that when one of my staff has a brilliant idea, they can go in, quickly prototype it. And because right now we've got a full global supply chain, but we are at the mercy of shipping. And so the thing that slows us down the most is we'll completely design the digital files. They're all ready to go. Then we send those to one of the many factories that I've built a relationship with. And they'll say, yeah, okay, I can make that printed circuit board for you. You'll have it in 6 weeks. And boom, that project grinds to a screaming halt. And I've got to find ways to occupy my engineers while we're waiting for those components to arrive. And so by making these engineering pods, that will drop from 6 weeks to 6 hours. And that's a much better turnaround time. And so I'm using this opportunity to sort of gallivant across the world and be a nomad and actually build these offices for our growing staff.
That's awesome.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
You seem like you've been somebody who kind of just like has more than just a couple months out in mind, or maybe even more than the next year in mind. You said something about that earlier. We've alluded to it a couple times when you told us about your origin story. That was kind of a thing. That seems. Would you say that's one of your biggest strengths?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware it was until one of my dearest friends, and he's also our chief marketing officer, Luis Cafisi, pointed it out. And you know, what's weird is I think he mentioned it, discussed it with you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have a clue that it's not the way I thought until he pointed it out. And so I guess the way that I would put it. Well, so it has to start a little morbid and cryptic, and I don't mean it to start that way. It'll get a little more positive in a moment. But Luis actually gave me this, and what it is a coin that reminds you that you're going to die. And it sounds like a weird place to start, right? But I find, and I have this in my pocket everywhere I go, and I'm constantly feeling it and touching it. It reminds me that my time on this planet is limited. Based on the actuary tables, I've got about 40 to 42 years left on this planet. What I love about knowing that is it burns away all the bullshit. And it helps remind me and ask the question, what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And one of the things that I've come to believe is that I need to be a steward, not an owner of anything, because it's all impermanent.
Right.
You know, if I build this company right, my son's going to be running it, and then someday his children will be running it, and then someday. So that's what we're trying to do, is build this intergenerational family business. But the moment you go, well, it's impermanent, I'm merely a caretaker for this thing that I'm trying to grow and foster, you start asking yourselves very different questions than most, in my experience, American CEOs ask. And you're like, well, what is the purpose of my business? The purpose of my business is not to enrich myself. The purpose of my business is actually that I'm the servant of the business, and I am here to serve my employees. Yes, guide them on the projects that I want to do. That's the perk, is that I get to say, this is the kind of crazy technology I want us working on. But short of that, I am here to make sure that my employees are getting to live the best versions of their life, and to grow the business in a way that it's focused on longevity, and it's something that will be around for my son to run, and that we are thinking intergenerationally. And the best example of this, because this can sound wacky to people, this is not the way that most American companies are built. We are impressed when a company's 30 years old. But I sent you guys a link to the Henneken website.
Right,
And
yeah.
Henneken is a global organization of the oldest corporations on the planet that are family owned. And it's a mind-blowing organization, and I am trying to build a company that will qualify to join. The youngest company allowed to join the Henneken company or the Henneken organization is 250 years old.
So you were thinking 200 and, I mean, you just started 6 months ago with this one.
Yes.
250 years from now, that's where your mind's at.
That's actually where what I wanted to do with an animation studio that I built in China, and unfortunately was stolen from me when I was 28. That's what I tried to do with Anthem One, and could not get other people to understand this. And only now can do it because one, I've got a team of people that believe in this concept, and I've got the financial resources to say we're fucking doing it my way. And I don't care how weird I sound or how different this is. I don't need another investor's buy-in. I need my buy-in. That's it. The buck stops with me. So we decided that the Henneken model is what we're aiming for. And what will blow your mind, if you like go through these companies, they've all created wild amounts of wealth for the families and the family friends, because you only have to be family controlled. Up to 49% of the business could be owned by other people. And so this is, imagine a family and their friends started a company in the 6th century. And it exists to this day. That's some of these companies. There's a Japanese hotel that has been in business since the 6th century. And they're a luxury hotel, but they're not the most expensive in the world. The rooms go for about $200 a night. And so from the moment that you're a young child that someday you get the opportunity to run this business, as long as you are a servant leader and you understand that you are merely a caretaker of this company and it must be passed on to the next generation. And that is how every single one of the Henneken companies has been run, many of them since the 6th century. There's not a single American company in there, partly because we're not an old enough nation, but also it's because American capitalism doesn't think in this kind of intergenerational timeline. And when you think this way, you approach a business from a very different point of view. It is important to me that everything that we do is built right, not fast, right. The myth that first to market wins, bullshit. Best to market wins. What I care about is building the best version of a technology with the cleanest supply chain and the most refined process for making our components, with a staff that was never overworked and never went through crunch time. And if we can't accomplish that, we're not doing our job right. So, and these beliefs are not just my own. These beliefs are in around 100 to 150 companies around the planet. And to me, that's what capitalism should be trying to emulate. And that's the timeline that I think on. And in 40 years, I'm gone. So what's my legacy? My legacy is how I treated my staff and how I was a husband, how I raised my son, and the responsibility and gift that I will have given him. And that's, if I do that right, then on my deathbed, I can be a very happy man.
Yeah, that's a lot for. No, that is fantastic. I love the way that you are thinking about that.
And it gets fun in the one meantime.
That's really deep. That's a very, very deep way of thinking of it. I don't know if we've gone there yet on Maker Monday. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I also think that's how making should be approached.
Yes, I mean it's a good philosophy in general, but making it quick is helpful. You're prototyping, but making it well and making it last. There's a lot of things that aren't made to last anymore.
No, and the best makers, I've seen makers in maker spaces that approach a project and as much as they're enjoying being creative, they're kind of throwing it together and the details don't matter. And then I've seen makers who are obsessed with creating something that very well could be a family heirloom. And that fairly heirloom is a functional R2D2.
For sure.
But
Yep.
that's badass. And you're
Totally.
looking at something that they have put 1,000 hours into. There's no way that's ending up in a garbage dump. That thing will be passed from generation to generation if they put enough care and love into that object. And that's the way that I've always approached furniture making. Because when the first year I was married, my wife had said that she never had a very nice bed, and I had noticed my parents had always slept on a Hollywood frame, and so I decided that I was going to make her a bed, and I was obsessed with doing this right. But I wasn't a very good furniture maker when I was 22, and so about a decade later, God, wow, it was actually 15 years later. It had gone through enough moves that this bed had sort of gotten bumped and manhandled, and pieces were getting a little loose. And I used it as an opportunity to tear the whole bed apart, use the exact same wood, and rebuild it, and put all my advanced maker skills into really doing this right, and put about 16 layers of lacquer on it, sanded every single layer. You know, I was on the back porch in Wisconsin in like negative 10-degree weather, and I'm sanding this sucker down because it's the only space we had, because we lived in a very tiny apartment at the time. And to this day, and I did that almost 10 years ago, that bed is perhaps the thing that I am the most proud of as a maker. It's just gorgeous. But you know what I should point out to you guys is where I first got this idea. And it was weird, but you know, I was a comic book collector, and I was about 11 years old, and my mom had kept 2 comic books from the 1960s. Had no idea why she kept them. She apparently had a very large collection in the 60s, but she'd only kept these 2. And it was a Superman, Superman's best friend, Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane. Very cheesy comic books. Writing ain't great, but that's not the point. The point was that here I was, a kid in the 80s, and my mom handed me 2 comic books from a decade before I was even born. And that's what lodged the idea in my head. What if this comic book collection that I'm building isn't really for me? What if it already belongs to my children? And from that point on, and I'm talking age 12, I was collecting comics fully with the intention of building out this collection that one day I would give to my kids. And my wife and I ended up only having one child, our son, who's 15 years old. And when he was about 11, I told him this collection of 2,500 issues, about 8 long boxes, is actually yours. And it's in my home office, but it belongs to you. And once I know you're old enough and you'll be a proper caretaker of it, the whole thing I'm giving to you. And it goes all the way back to your grandmother, which includes issues from like 1967. And I think that's probably the origins of where I started thinking long-term and intergenerationally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it's great to see where people realize that they picked up on these things. You seem very self-aware of those. We're 25 minutes in, or over, I should say. I want to be very respectful of your time. I have one more question I really want to make sure that we ask.
Happy to answer.
So you get a time machine. This is one of my favorite ones. You get a time machine. You can go back and talk to past you and tell yourself whatever you want. What is it that you need that your past you would have needed to hear? And a lot of this question is just about, what's some advice to people who want to end up around where you are?
Okay, so that's a great question. And this came up recently with one of my very best engineers. If I could travel back in time, I'd go back to when I was 19 at NYU. God, I can remember this exactly. I was in my dorm room, and I had been working on this idea for a laser color grading system for celluloid film, because digital color grading didn't even exist yet. I went to film school in 1992. And we had just barely started doing digital editing. George Lucas's edit droid had just left his fabrication laboratory maybe 5 years prior. And so digital editing was in its infancy. And we're all still shooting on celluloid. I'm shooting on 16 millimeter film. And my first big film that I did, the one I told you about where I turned everyone into an animated object, had gotten into the senior thesis film festival at NYU. And I was getting the opportunity to color grade it. And it was so remarkably primitive. It was known as a 3-light system, which quite literally meant I can expose a frame at 33%, 66%, or 99%. It was very, very crude. And it drove me crazy because there were things that I wanted to do with the image. I wanted to burn this part in because I had a still photography background. And I'm like, I can do these things with large format photography. I can do this on my Hasselblad, but I cannot do this as a motion picture cinematographer. And I'd started sketching out this crazy idea for using a series of lasers and prisms to almost at the granular level, the silver highlight crystal level, create this laser color grading system. And one of my friends thought it was brilliant. And they knew a couple people at Industrial Light Magic and decided to get someone from ILM on the phone with me. And so I'm sitting in my dorm room and we're having this long distance call from New York City to somebody in Northern California. And the guy says to me, "Who the fuck are you to think that you could come up with something that we can't do?" And it's like my whole life just deflated. It was just the rug had been pulled out from under me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. And he went on for about 2 minutes about how stupid I was, how I couldn't possibly know what I'm talking about. I don't have an engineering background. Who the fuck am I to be an inventor? And what I wish I could do is sit that 19-year-old version of myself down and say, when other people tell you that you can't do something, they're actually talking about themselves. They are not talking about you. And I probably wasted a decade of my life second-guessing myself and not leaning heavily into this amazing gift that autism has given me. This ability to perseverate and dig deep into the science of something and figure out what really makes something tick. I probably would have been a successful inventor much earlier on if I had been able to silence those negative voices. And they might be a mother, they might be a father, they could be other people in a makerspace who are jealous, it could be a professor. All these voices could come from somewhere. But if you know that you're a highly disciplined person and you're serious and you're curious, anybody telling you that you can't do something, they're lying and they are talking about themselves. They're the ones that lives in a small world. And this doesn't just affect me. I have this brilliant engineer, and he came to me about a week ago when we were having a private conversation, and he was going through the same thing. He said, "How is it that we're the team that is inventing Petra?" And I can't tell you what Petra is yet.
Sure.
And he's like, "Why didn't somebody else invent it?" And he's 24 years old. He's a very young engineer. And so this is the advice that I gave him. I turned to him and I said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you're not brilliant. I hired you because you're brilliant. I hired you because you're special. And it doesn't matter that this is not the engineering discipline that you have experience in. You are capable of understanding science, and you are capable of asking the most important question possible, which is, why can't we do better?" And that's what qualifies you to be an inventor. So that's what I would say to myself as a 19-year-old. Also, why the hell did you invent the time machine? That's the other thing. So
Well, that's how you get the time machine, is that you have to go invent the time machine.
Yeah.
You're saying that you have.
Man, that's
Maybe that's what Petra is. We don't know, guys. Maybe he's talking about a time machine. He said he was going to change everything. So
no, I'm not working on a time machine.
damn.
So
I was expecting that.
no.
Or a replicator. Can we have a replicator, please? Or a
I
holodeck?
believe there are people working on a replica.
I know. Oh, I know. I want it. I want a holodeck
My
too.
current understanding of quantum mechanics.
As much as I'm a Star Wars fan through and through,
Yeah.
all the tech that they have in Star Trek, that's what I want. I want all that stuff, right?
Oh hell yeah, that is the better tech by far.
It's the better hanging out tech and the better like just being a normal hang.
They have better role models. Who doesn't want to be Jean-Luc Picard?
I don't know. You don't say anything bad about Obi-Wan Kenobi around me, all right?
Well, fair enough. Absolutely.
All right. He's a role model. But yeah, and we can talk way into that. I gotta say, Justin, that was incredibly fun to listen to. I know we didn't ask a whole lot of questions. You, as you know, you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
love doing this with you guys. And by the way, the next time I'm in the States, I got to stop by your guys' makerspace and you know, let's have some fun. Let's make something together.
For sure.
Nice.
You, anytime you're in Indiana from your many travels around the world, you hit me up.
Okay.
Give me a little bit of notice so I can make sure I'm around. But yeah, I will be there. And we also are going to have you come back. I know I have said this before. We've had a couple people come back, but I would love to revisit a lot of the guests that we've had on here, and especially, after we know what Petra is, right? That'd be fantastic.
Yes, definitely want to talk about that once it's ready.
Right, and just all the things, and it's not just that too. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for 3-4 more hours.
Yeah,
easy right now, but.
I'll come back in February if you guys want. Then we'll be able to talk about Petra, Nairobi, and Thor. Those are our 3 big projects.
All right. Well, that is February. You are not kidding about being on a timeline that's different.
Yeah.
Right. Most people are like, "Oh, I'll talk to you in a year or 2." You're like, February. That's like right around the corner. You got Christmas too in there, so yeah. Well, I'm excited about having you back. I thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show. And James, you know, your audience needs to know this. You're a brilliant maker. And what you did for us is mind-blowing. And as far as I'm concerned, you're my prop master and designer for the rest of my life. I absolutely love working with you.
Well, hey, man, here's to everything that we're going to do together later.
Yeah.
You change the world, and then we can start making a bunch of cool movie stuff too.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm super excited
for Comic-Con and win the whole, you know, masquerade or whatever they call the.
And you're talking about, like, when you say Comic-Con, you're talking about San Diego Comic-Con. Yeah, like just Comic-Con. When I'm talking about Comic-Con, it's like every weekend. I was just at one this past weekend. But
I want to do something ridiculous.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to go. We'll at least have to go to San Diego together.
Absolutely.
When you're back in the States.
Might be, so my whole company's having a retreat in San Diego in January. That's the first time our whole virtual staff is getting together. And so I've rented a mansion for the staff. It's a freaking incredible 10 bedrooms on the Pacific Ocean, right on the cliff, with a giant infinity pool. Everyone's got their own private bedroom. It's going to be the first time the whole staff has gotten together. And we all get to really work with each other for about 4 days. And then probably the next time I'll be back in the United States is probably for San Diego Comic-Con. And you and I need to get drunk, brother. So,
yeah, and Kofi's also a DJ and a bunch of other stuff. We can definitely find it. Yeah, like we'll
Patrick, you're so quiet. I apologize that I'm not.
He's not normally quiet. It's just that you're just a good storyteller, so we're just letting you do it, man.
Yeah.
All right.
But with that, actually, I want Justin, please tell us like where we can follow, if we can follow along this work. Will there be a website? Is there someplace that we can do? Does everybody have to wait until February and get back onto the show to find out?
We shortly will have an EvansWerks.com website. We already got the domain.
Okay.
That will be live soon. But it's more than likely going to be in stealth mode for at least 6 months. But very soon, so if people want to just keep paying attention to evansworks.com,
sure.
The other thing that they should do is they should follow Jason Moore on Instagram,
Okay.
as we will be releasing Honor Among Thieves to YouTube in the next month or so. We want to drop Honor Among Thieves on YouTube right after his new Netflix series, First Kill, comes out. And so he'll be promoting that heavily on YouTube,
Awesome.
or excuse me, on Instagram. And so if you know Jason R. Moore or Jason Moore, find his Instagram feed, and he's also awesome. He's fun to follow. He's way cooler than me. He's way cooler than me. I don't even know why he's my friend. He's super cool, and I'm nerdy. So those would be the two best places to keep track of us until we have our official website live.
Well, yeah, that works. Follow a Hollywood actor on Instagram. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And of course, he could probably follow you on LinkedIn. So
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn, but I'm never on LinkedIn because I hate LinkedIn. Too much like Facebook for my taste. And
There you go, Kofi.
I have a Twitter feed, but I never post to it. My wife has pushed me a couple times to start talking about like the autistic experience on it. I'm like, Elon Musk already does plenty of tweeting, and I've learned my lesson to probably stay away from social media. So that's not my.
I think that what you're doing is working for you, and also, I mean, you're able to focus in on the work that you're doing. So that's great. Social media can be an incredible distraction. I think it is for a lot of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And proven to be toxic. So it's just not my bag. I'm actually a very simple person. I spend 8 hours a day working, and then I try to spend 4 hours a day with my family, and then when they go to sleep, I do about 2 to 3 hours every night, heavily researching something I don't know. And so what I've been working through for about the last 9 months is virology and quantum mechanics. And now I'm not an expert, but I'm getting a pretty good handle on those. And once I've got pretty good, I need to get 1 or 2 more levels higher in quantum mechanics, and then I don't know what I'll be moving on to. But that's all my life is those 3 things: running my company, spending time with my family, and research. So, and making crazy shit. So
Honestly, that's a pretty good model, right? Because a lot of people do spend 2-3 hours just scrolling on Facebook a day. That's pretty rough.
God, if you've got one of these coins, then you suddenly realize what a waste of time. Don't show people a photo of your burrito.
Kofi, just stop listening right now.
Cares if someone from junior high likes you.
I feel you. It
does not matter. What matters is the clock is running on every single one of us, and what are we going to do with that time left, and how do we make the world a better place in that period of time? And that's all that matters. So don't mean to get weird and morbid.
No, that's not weird. That's good. But as we were going to end our broadcast on Facebook, we're going.
There's that, right?
No. It's fine. That's like the point of this, right? But no, everything you were saying, I'm glad you told us the coin story. I mean, it's a really awesome story. It's a really good way of looking at things. Again, thank you so much for being on here, and everybody watching. And I'm going to be sharing this video out again, and we'll also be having this go up on our YouTube as well, so you can rewatch it, and hopefully you can share it out to people too. I learned a lot, and thank you. And we'll have you back. Okay. Kofi, you want to go ahead and say your thing?
Hey, I'm Patrick Kofi Austin from Mojo Up. You can find me at LinkedIn at Patrick Kofi Austin.
Man, now you feel badly for saying LinkedIn because
Oh, no.
I know. Your LinkedIn's about, and you're about LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I'm James Wolfgar, and you can find me most of the time downtown Lafayette, Indiana, in the Makerspace in Matchbox Co-working Studio. Matchbox Makerspace. We have all kinds of different making tools. We also have a media studio and a ton of different things. We're in a co-working studio, so lots of different people coming in and out daily of different backgrounds, and it's a great place to do. If you're not from around here, I encourage you highly to look up co-working studios near me and maker spaces near me. They are a great place to work remotely, kind of like what he was just saying, without having to work out of your house. But with that, I will see you guys in 2 weeks. We have another guest speaker there. He's going to be great too. I'll see you in 2 weeks, guys. Bye.